Hey everyone, it's Miss Billings. Today we're going to be looking at the properties of multiplication. There are 5 different properties that you can use to help you solve your multiplication facts. Let's go ahead and look at the first one. So the first one is the associative property. And that means that the way that you group numbers together in a problem will not change the answer or the product. Because remember, the answer to a multiplication problem is called the product. So let's look at this example. If I have 3 times 4 times 2, I imagine that the parentheses is giving it like a little hug. So you can put a hug around 3 and 4 and multiply that and get 12 times 2, and that gives me 24. Well, the same thing here. I can take 3 times 4 times 2 and give a hug around the 4 and the 2 this time, and that gives me 4 times 2 is 8 times 3 times 8 is 24. It doesn't matter which group your parentheses is around, which group is giving a hug, your answer of 24 is still going to be the same. So the next one we're going to look at is the commutative property. The commutative property means that the order in which you multiply the numbers, it will not change the product. Remember, that's the answer to a multiplication problem. So, for example, 2 times 4 equals 8. Well, this is an array that shows 2 times 4 equals 8. 2 times 4, I have 2 rows of 4 in each row, and that gives me 8. But if I flip those numbers around, that gives me 4 times 2, and I have 4 rows with 2 in them each. It doesn't matter, they still both equal 8. You can switch them around because it doesn't matter that the product is going to be the exact same answer.
Wipe it down. Wipe it down. Wipe.
So now let's look at the distributive property. The distributive property is the one that's kind of like, I'm a little nervous about it. But once you get this formula down, you're going to be fine. So let's look and see what it says. If I don't know the product of 6 times 8, well, I know that the distributive property says that a problem can be broken up into the sum of 2 smaller facts. So look right here, 6 times 8. That means I have 8 groups of 6, but I can break it up into one group of 5 and one group of 3. I broke this 8 right here up into 2 smaller numbers, 5 and 3, because 8 is 5 plus 3. So now I can take 6 times 5 and 6 times 3. And so what I do is I distribute that 6 out into my two smaller numbers. So then I take 6 times 5 and 6 times 3. Well, 6 times 5 is 30, and 6 times 3 is 18. So I'm going to put those two numbers together, and I'm going to get 48. I add up 30 and 18, and I get 48. The tricky part about this is to remember which numbers you need to multiply and which numbers that you need to add.
When the beat drop, I'ma give it straight to him like, give it to him, 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 yeah. Give it to him, give it to him, give it to him, give it to him. Now slide to the beat like.
All right. This one is the identity property, and I like to look at this one like a mirror. So hold up your arm in front of you like this. This is your mirror, and it also stands for the number 1. So the product of any number times 1 is itself. When you look into a mirror, you see yourself. So let's look at these examples. 8 times 1 is 8. 12 times 1 is 12. 2,000 times 1 is 2,000. Any number times 1 is going to be that same number. And imagine yourself like looking into a mirror. And the last one, zero property. Any product of a number times 0 is 0. Imagine it like a black hole. You've talked about that in space before. Anything that falls into a black hole is gone forever. So 9 times 0 is 0. 16 times 0 is 0. 4,450 times 0 is 0. That's exactly right. So let's run back through these again. The associative property, use your parentheses like a hug. You're hugging different numbers. Your answers will always be the same. Commutative property, it's like a switch. Doesn't matter the order of the numbers, they will still give you the same product. The distributive property, you are distributing that multiplication fact by the two easier numbers. The identity property, it's like your mirror. What do you see? It's a complete reflection. And the zero property is like a black hole, is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of practice. So let's talk about the associative property. So that's those 3 numbers that you're multiplying together, but I don't know how to multiply 3 numbers together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hug around 2 numbers, and then we're going to multiply the 3rd number. So we have 5 times 2 times 3. Well, the first 2 numbers I'm going to hug are the 5 and the 2. And that gives me 10. Well, 10 times 3 equals 30. All right, now let's hug our other number. Let's pick a different color. 5 times 2 times 3. Well, then I put a hug around the other 2 numbers, and I know that 2 times 3 is 6 times 5. Well, 5 times 6 is 30. Both of my products are exactly the same. That's how that works. When I multiply 3 numbers together, I can group 2 of those numbers to make one product and then multiply that number by the number that's remaining. And that's just an easier way to multiply 3 different numbers. Now, let's practice the distributive property. This is the one that's a little bit more difficult, but once you get the hang of it, you're going to be great. So 7 times 6. I don't know just off the top of my head what 7 times 6 is. So I'm going to break up my bigger number into 2 smaller numbers. Well, I know that 5 plus 2 equals 7. So now I go ahead and write down my formula just like this. Every time. Before I even start my problem, I write down my formula just like this. Parentheses, multiplication sign, parentheses, plus, parentheses, multiplication sign, parentheses. I'm going to plug in these numbers into both of my sets of parentheses, a 5 and a 2. And then I'm going to take my 6 that's left over and plug it in. So now I have the 2 numbers that were broken up to make 7, and they're both multiplied by 6. So now I can go ahead and multiply like regular. 5 times 6 is 30. 6 times 2 is 12. Well, when I add those 2 numbers together, because I bring down my addition sign, that's going to give me 42. So 6 times 7 is 42. All right, so now let's try 4 times 9. Well, I always try to break up my bigger number, so my 9 can be broken up into, let's say, 4 and 5, because 4 plus 5 equals 9. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out my formula, parentheses times parentheses, plus parentheses times parentheses. Now I'm going to plug in those numbers where they belong. First, I'm going to start with my 4 and my 5. 4, 5. And then I'm going to throw in my 4 that's left over, times 4 times 4. So now I've got my 4 from right here and my 5 and my 4 from right here. Great job. We've used all of our numbers. Now we're going to multiply like regular. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 4 is 20. bring down your addition sign, and you add those together, and that's going to give you 36. So your answer for 4 times 9 equals 36. Now eventually you'll be able to do these automatically because you will have memorized your multiplication facts. But if there's ever a problem that you don't know how to do because you don't know how to multiply that number, then these are the strategies that you can use.